Antepartum hemorrhage, APH, is a commonly encountered pregnancy-related complication associated with significant maternal and fetal morbidity and mortality, especially in developing countries. In this lecture, we're going to go through the definition of antepartum hemorrhage, possible differential causes of APH, looking into the common causes of APH in detail, and finally coming to how we manage a bleeding pregnant lady in need of our help. This lecture covers the topic of antepartum hemorrhage. First, we'll discuss what antepartum hemorrhage is, including clinical features and diagnosis. We will discuss the differential diagnosis and go into detail for a few important causes of antepartum hemorrhage. Then, we will review anticipated complications of antepartum hemorrhage, general management principles and specific principles tailored to the specific cause. Understanding antepartum hemorrhage is crucial for healthcare providers to ensure timely diagnosis and management, which can significantly reduce morbidity and mortality associated with this condition. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to clearly articulate what constitutes antepartum hemorrhage, including its timing and potential causes. You should be able to highlight the key conditions that can cause APH, anticipate potential maternal and fetal complications, and apply active management strategies accordingly. Let's start with a case scenario. A 25-year-old gravida 2-para-1 female presenting at 32 weeks gestational age, after noting a sudden gush of blood from her vagina while watching television soaking through her clothes. What is your differential diagnosis for potential causes of bleeding for this patient? Pause this video and take a minute to write down what you think is the reason for her bleeding. Based on the RCOG definition, antepartum hemorrhage is genital bleeding at 24 or more weeks of pregnancy. The definition varies between guidelines and countries based on the gestational age. For instance, the cutoff is 24 weeks for UK and 28 weeks for Ethiopian cases. This variety is attributed to the lower limit of fetal viability for extrauterine survival, which depends on the level of care. In North America, the distinction is usually made at 20 weeks, where antepartum hemorrhage is considered to be an obstetrical issue after 20 weeks of gestation. The cause of APH remains undetermined in about half of cases. But the most common differential diagnoses for antepartum hemorrhage are listed here. Placental abruption, placenta previa, vasa previa, bloody show, local cervical or vaginal bleeding, cervical insufficiency. Let's start by talking about placental abruption. Placental abruption occurs when the placenta detaches from the uterine wall at or after 20 weeks of gestation. The condition can cause severe maternal hemorrhage and poses risks to fetal well-being, making it a critical obstetric emergency. It is estimated to occur in 3 to 10 per 1,000 singleton births. Placental abruption may be acute or chronic. Patients with chronic abruption experience relatively light, chronic, intermittent bleeding OG. Patients with an acute abruption present with the abrupt onset of vaginal bleeding, mild to moderate abdominal pain, and uterine contractions. Abruption arises from hemorrhage into the decidua basilis of the placenta, which results in the formation of hematoma and an increase in hydrostatic pressure, leading to separation of the adjacent placenta. The resultant hematoma may be small and self-limited or continue dissecting through the decidual layers. The amount of vaginal bleeding does not correlate well with actual blood loss, since the hematoma may not reach the margin of the placenta and cervix. The blood may spread between the decidua and the fetal membrane and pass through the cervix or may extravasate through the membranes into the amniotic fluid. The clinical features of placental abruption are highly variable depending on the severity of the placental abruption and the complications. Patients with an acute abruption classically present with the abrupt onset of vaginal bleeding, mild to moderate abdominal pain, and uterine contractions. Back pain may be an additional prominent symptom when the RLASNT is on the posterior wall of the uterus. The uterus is often firm and may be rigid and tender. When an abruption is concealed, which happens in 10 to 20% of cases, Patients present because of uterine contractions and irritability. They have no abdominal pain and no or minimal vaginal bleeding. All or most of the blood is trapped between the fetal membranes and SISA rather than escaping through the cervix and vagina. A non-reassuring fetal heart rate pattern may be present. These are the risk factors for placental abruption, of which a previous history of placental abruption is the most important risk factor. The risk of abruption recurring in a subsequent pregnancy is increased as much as 10-fold. The recurrence risk is 25-fold higher in a third pregnancy when 2 previous pregnancies are complicated by abruption. The risk of abruption is 3 to 4-fold higher among pregnant people with chronic hypertension and 4 to 6-fold higher among those with preeclampsia, particularly preeclampsia with severe features. Things that cause sudden uterine decompression, such as premature rupture of membranes, delivery of the first twin, or trauma like motor vehicle crashes, falls, or domestic abuse during pregnancy, place a patient at higher risk for placental abruption. 1 in 10 patients in the third trimester who use cocaine will have an abruption. Cigarette smoking increases risk by 4-fold. Let's move on to discuss placenta previa. Placenta previa refers to the presence of placental tissue that extends over the internal cervical os. Most cases identified earlier in pregnancy resolve before birth. The prevalence of clinically evident placenta previa at term is estimated to be approximately 4 or 5 per 1,000 pregnancies. Placenta previa recurs in 4 to 8% of subsequent pregnancies. There is also an association between previous cesarean section delivery and the occurrence of placenta previa in subsequent pregnancies. This association is increased with a shorter interval between pregnancies and a higher number of repeat cesarean sections. The risk of placenta previa with a previous cesarean section can be as high as 60% in a subsequent pregnancy. The bolded risk factors are the major ones that contribute to placenta previa. Placenta previa is commonly diagnosed during a routine ultrasound in the second trimester. Transvaginal ultrasound is more accurate than transabdominal, and safe. Follow-up sonogram is recommended at 28 to 32 weeks of gestation to look for persistent placenta previa, since most of these cases will resolve by the time of delivery. MRI may be used to evaluate for placenta accreta spectrum disorders, other placental abnormalities that carry a very high morbidity and mortality, and may suggest the need for a scheduled cesarean hysterectomy. Placenta previa is usually diagnosed on antenatal ultrasound. However, there may be patients who did not obtain an ultrasound, or in whom the previa was missed. Sudden, painless, bright red vaginal bleeding in the second half of pregnancy may indicate placenta previa. Bleeding is very common in this condition, with about 90% of patients with placenta previa presenting with bleeding at some time in their pregnancy. Unlike placental abruption, bleeding from placenta previa is usually painless. There are other clinical findings that depend on the amount of bleeding, like hypovolemia and anemia. The uterus is usually soft. We'll move on now to discuss another cause of antepartum hemorrhage. Vasa previa. Vasa previa is a rare obstetric condition where fetal blood vessels cross or run in close proximity to the internal cervical os, unsupported by placental tissue. This positioning makes them vulnerable to rupture during labor or when membranes rupture. Vasa previa is usually diagnosed antenatally based on ultrasound with color Doppler flow confirming the presence of a blood vessel over the cervical os. Clinical diagnosis suspected if vaginal bleeding occurring upon rupture of membranes, accompanied by FHRABN, especially sinusoidal pattern or bradycardia. You could consider performing a Kleihauer-Betke test, but the result of this test would take too long and management should be initiated based on clinical scenario. Now that we have discussed in detail some specific causes of antepartum hemorrhage, let's return to the larger topic. Depending on the severity, antepartum hemorrhage can lead to morbidity and mortality for both the mother and fetus. Most of the complications occur in almost all causes of antepartum hemorrhage, though some are directly linked to specific causes. A large amount of bleeding can lead to hypovolemic shock in the mother. If there is placental abruption, she is at increased risk of disseminated intravascular coagulopathy. When there is placenta previa, the mother is at increased risk of placenta accreta and possible need for hysterectomy. There are risks associated with blood transfusion. The events surrounding an emergent birth may be quite traumatic for patients. From a fetal, neonatal perspective, there is a risk of fetal hypoxia or asphyxia and even death. In cases of chronic abruption or vasa previa, there is a risk of growth restriction. Since there is sometimes a need for preterm birth, there may be a risk of malpresentation. And preterm birth itself carries risks for the fetus, like respiratory distress. Let's return to our case. As a reminder, our patient was presenting with bleeding at 32 weeks. Early recognition and prompt, appropriate management are crucial to minimize adverse maternal and fetal outcomes associated with antepartum hemorrhage. In this case scenario, what investigations would you do? How do you manage the patient if she is having very heavy bleeding versus minimal bleeding? Pause this video and take a moment to write down your response. The primary goal of management is focusing on your ABCS. In this case, C, for circulation, is the focus. Closely monitor maternal hemodynamic status, heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, urine output. Perform a speculum exam to rule out other causes of bleeding, like a cervical polyp for example. Avoid digital vaginal examination unless placenta previa is ruled out. Remember that actual blood loss may be far in excess of what is observed due to retained bleeding, or clot formation. If available and the patient is stable enough, perform an SLTR as Omicron SOO examination to evaluate fetal size, growth, amniotic fluid volume, and to examine the RLASENTA for placental location, to rule out RLASENTA previa or vasa previa as causes of BLIOG, and for evidence of clot, hematoma. Monitor the fetal heart rate, to assess for fetal heart rate decelerations or sinusoidal rhythms. You should obtain 4-access and start intravenous fluids. Have blood available if bleeding is heavy. Depending on the gestational age, you may consider giving antenatal corticosteroids in case there is a risk of preterm birth. These are usually given if the gestational age is less than 34 weeks. Based on the severity of bleeding and reason for bleeding, you may decide whether it is safe to monitor the patient or if she needs urgent delivery, usually by cesarean section. This flowchart can be used to decide what the management steps should be. First, determine patient stability. If the pregnant patient is unstable, start resuscitation and deliver. If stable, investigate further and monitor. In general, preterm patients. But the bleeding is subsiding, and they are hemodynamically stable with no fetal compromise and are safe to be monitored. If the patient is full term, you can consider delivery or induction of labor. Even if they are preterm but have heavy bleeding or hemodynamic compromise, you should be delivered urgently. There is no actual evidence for or against avoiding high-impact exercise activities, but is prudent to recommend. Patients should absolutely avoid intercourse. The health status of both mother and baby plays a critical role in deciding when and how to deliver. Elective cesarean sections are usually scheduled between 36 to 37 weeks of gestation, balancing the risks of preterm delivery with the need to avoid complications from bleeding. In cases of severe bleeding or maternal, fetal distress, an emergency cesarean may be necessary regardless of gestational age. Regarding mode of delivery, cesarean delivery is indicated for complete or partial placenta previa due to the high risk of bleeding if vaginal delivery is attempted. Major abruption is an emergency. The management of moderate or severe placental abruption is resuscitation, delivery of the fetus and observation for and correction of any coagulation defect that arises. A trial of labor and vaginal delivery is recommended whenever tolerated by the maternal-fetal pair. If fetal distress is present, then delivery should be expedited in the form of caesarean section. In summary, timely diagnosis and a structured management approach are essential for optimizing outcomes in cases of antepartum hemorrhage. Diagnosis of placental abruption is clinical, whereas placenta previa is usually diagnosed based on an ultrasound scan. Management includes resuscitation as necessary, close maternal and fetal monitoring and delivery if necessary. The decision for delivery should be based on gestational age, maternal condition, and fetal status.